Welcome to the Eagle Theater Podcasts. I'm Chris Miller, Artistic Director of the Eagle Theater. Today we talk with Ben Lipitz, Broadway actor who, until this pandemic shutdown, was on the Broadway tour of Disney's The Lion King, starring in the role of Pumbaa. This is part one of a two-part conversation where we discuss the beginning of Ben's acting journey, his education, and his first breaks, as well as advice he has for actors who are trying to follow in his footsteps. All right, this is Chris Miller with the Eagle Theater doing our first inaugural podcast. And this podcast is designed to bring artists in the community to the community and just having a nice conversation about their life experiences, some funny stories, and hopefully we can learn something and laugh a little and enjoy a little. So the inaugural podcast is with Ben Lipitz, star of stage and screen. And he is here with us today to talk about his experiences in the arts, in life, and how he got to where he got, and what potentially he's got going for him in the future. So, Ben, welcome to the Eagle Theater Podcast, and I'm so excited to have you here on the inaugural show.
Thanks. I'm really thrilled to be here with you. Welcome everybody listening. I'm really excited to share anything I can with you today.
That's great. So I guess let's, start from the beginning. How young were you when you got into performing?
Well, let's see. I was born. No. I think the bug for me bit in third grade. I attended public school in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. In the late 60s, 70s, graduated high school in 82. But when I was in third grade, I got cast in a Christmas pageant show that was written by one of the teachers. And I was a reindeer, but I was a special reindeer. I was Saul, the Jewish reindeer, who didn't make the cut.
Oh, no.
And it was a running gag. It was just kind of a funny bit. But once I heard an audience laugh, that was it. I was intoxicated, and the bug bit. And all through grade school and middle school and high school especially, I pursued a love of theater and performing.
And that's kind of an ironic start, especially with the role of Saul, the reindeer that didn't make the cut. Because obviously, for any performer listening to this podcast, they understand that, they don't make the cut a lot. Like, that's part of the business. Rejection, I hear, is something that you just have to get used to and not let it bother you. How do you cope with that as a performer, at any audition that you go to?
It doesn't matter what level you're performing on, whether you're in a school play, community theater, regional theater, Broadway, film, or television. Not getting a role stings no matter what. What you have to remember is that landing a role, getting hired, that's kind of the gravy, on top of what you're doing. The goal for any working actor should be to audition, to pursue their craft. When you audition, you get a couple of minutes to be your absolute best. If you book the job or don't book the job becomes less important, so long as you're pursuing your craft to the best of your ability. And I say that with a lot of experience behind me, because not getting cast in something rarely has anything to do with you personally. As artists, especially actors, any artist, we really invest and what's the word I'm thinking of? I guess invest is it. We invest in our
soul into
a very personal contribution. And when we don't get the result we expect, we feel it's a personal rejection, and nothing could be further from the truth. Not getting cast in a role has to do with you're either too tall, too thin, too short, too fat, too round, too blue, too yellow, too green. It has very little to do with you, but the complexion or the makeup of the company they're building. And I also offer casting directors and directors who are auditioning actors, especially performing artists. When you come into the room, they're rooting for you. They are behind that desk 100% hoping that you're the solution to their problem, that you're going to be exactly the fit they want. They couldn't be more supportive. And I think we've created in our minds this us versus them dynamic because we're so afraid of not giving them what they want or not being good enough. and you have to kind of let all that go and just go in and be your most natural self. And if you're not right for them, then they're not right for you, and you move on to the next one.
And I think that is so true in a lot of levels. And another thing too, from my experience, is that depending on the way this show is going to be cast, or who may already be cast, may also determine whether you're the right person for that role or not, and how they feel you may interact with that other actor. So there's a lot of other things externally going into that decision. But you're right. Everybody wants to cast a show as quickly as possible so we can get moving on to the more intricate parts of the production.
And it's also not just your talent or your ability, it's your personality, which you should always be your most natural self, because producers, casting directors, they're looking to put together a company that's going to be together for anywhere between a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and in some very rare cases, long-term, even a couple of years. They want to know that you know how to work, that you're a responsible artist, that you're going to be prepared. And that's why the audition is such an important, integral interview, because how you audition really sets the tone for your working relationship. Did you prepare the material? Did you know what the play or musical or show or film, television show was about? Do you fit in that universe? Are you appropriate for it? Doing all of that personal homework is key, because it sends a signal to the producers that you're prepared, that you know your place in the marketplace, that you know that you're right for this, and then it becomes a second decision. Preparation and doing your homework is probably 90% of a successful audition.
That's great advice, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think if young actors, or even seasoned actors who are still trying to maybe get their big break, just to keep that to heart and understand that you just got to keep going and keep pushing, and don't take it personally. Don't take that negative and internalize it.
Right. And that's why I say the whole goal of the audition is to do your best work, because you might not be right for this job, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to trigger something in someone that says, oh, they might not be right for this role, but boy, they would be great for that role.
Right. So it gets you out there.
I'm in the future. So every audition is an opportunity for future employment.
That's great. And that makes, that's totally what everybody has to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you went to Cherry Hill. Let's take a moment to reflect your time there. And what show through your high school career do you still remember the most, the fondest, a moment that you can go back to that high school Ben Lipitz and relive in your head?
The show in high school, I had a complex family life. My parents were divorced on both sides of town, so I went to both East and West before it was a choice in the school district to go to either school. The play that the experience that stands out the most for me was my senior year, where I was cast in a murder mystery called Laura, and I was the detective. It was one of the leading roles, and it was just one of the best experiences I had. I had done some musicals, I'd done some one-act plays, I even did some community theater with Haddonfield Plays and Players when I was maybe 14 or 15 years old, and that play to me in high school stands out, because I think that was the moment when I decided that I really wanted to do this for a career.
That's awesome. So then college, you decide you're going to major in film or in theater, or both?
I majored in acting.
Okay.
I for a Bachelor of Fine Arts in acting at California Institute of the Arts, Cal Arts. It was a really prestigious performing arts program, a studio program. It was a 4-year acting program, and my time there literally became the filter through which I view all of my work.
That's awesome. Now, let me ask you this, because I know there's sometimes an eternal debate about artists, about, the college experience and the value, not so much in the value of college, because I think everybody understands that, but more so you have a group of artists that sometimes say, well, I'm just going to not go to school and I'm going to audition versus going to school. What would your advice from your experience be why the college path was very helpful for you?
There is no right path for anyone.
Okay.
It is a choice. I know plenty of performing artists who did not attend a traditional college or a fine arts program, and I know plenty who did. It's really what serves you best. I chose a college path because 30-something years ago or 40-something years ago, that's what you did. There wasn't the industry that exists as it does today. The traditional path was you had to train, you needed to train as a performer. Now, I could have gone to New York and just auditioned, but I wouldn't have had a skill set. I wouldn't have had any technique. I could have joined a private acting studio. I could have found a dance class. I could have found, a voice teacher and auditioned along the way. But for me, all of the skill and technique building worked better for me in one place. So I was kind of just immersed in a performing arts degree so that for the time I was in college, I had an acting studio, I had voice and speech, I had movement, we were required to take Tai Chi, which 40 years later, I still do as a major part of my life, as part of my warm-up. We had, a singing class, we studied theater history, we studied critical analysis of other art forms to give us as broad a base as possible. And I think that's why, for me, the college path was so successful, because it taught me to broaden my foundation and not just be singly focused on my performance work. I think other art forms and disciplines have made me a deeper, richer performer because I've learned through other experience as well as just, my performance art form, which is performing. It's different for everyone. I knew that I wasn't an ingenue. I was a character man even when I was 18, and I knew that I was going to have to wait for my age to catch up to my character type. So committing to study was an easy choice. If you decide that you do want to go right into the marketplace, you still have to study. You have to learn your craft along the way. You should always be in a studio class. If you're an actor, no matter whether you're a dancer, singer, or actor, you have to be building your skill set all the time. So it's a lifelong process. I'm still I still take studio class when I can. I still work with a vocal coach. I still take a movement class every now and then. And even while I've been working for a very long time with the current show that I'm on, I've still managed to find some classes along the way. When we were in residence in Chicago for a long time, I took open class at the Joffrey Ballet, and I was probably the only 30 or 40-something-year-old man at the bar, which was, I'm sure, a sight, but that's the kind of commitment I think we need to have throughout our entire career. It's a learning process that never stops.
Yeah, never stop learning. That's a great piece of advice. Okay, so college is finished, and now you're out in the quote-unquote real world. When did your first big break, as we typically define big break, come, and what was that like?
There was a lot of exploration before I even got into the real world. I finished Cal Arts. I came home to the East Coast, settled in Philadelphia, where I became a teaching assistant for the dean of the School of Theater at what is now University of the Arts. Okay. And I was teaching assistant and teaching a class. I kicked around Philadelphia for a number of years, auditioning and taking class, and not really quite ready to jump into the deep end of the pool. But that time was really fundamental and foundational because I was learning to apply everything I'd learned in school. Along the way, I applied to graduate school and got accepted to a program, did 1 year and didn't complete the degree because I found that the teaching focus in that program was trying to undo the work that I had done in my Bachelor of Fine Arts. So trying to get an MFA, even though it was a prestigious program. And I thought that was a really great goal to go after. I left after 1 year because I just found that I was in such conflict with their model of teaching from what I'd already learned and was already working for me. So from there, I just started auditioning, and every job you get is a big break. It doesn't matter what level it's on. You should view everything as a big break because work creates more work. And I've come to the belief that over the years, I believe in the idea of get a bigger problem. Anytime you're pursuing work, you're auditioning, and you're worried about getting that job so that if I get this job or if I get cast in this season, then I can take the next step. Or if this job, I'll work with this director and then maybe they'll cast me in something else, or I'll have enough confidence that I can go after bigger work. Get a bigger problem. Those are the little things. Those are the things that trip us up because we're no longer paying attention to ourselves as artists and what we can contribute to a conversation that might not have happened because of our work. Focus on the bigger issue as an artist, and the little stuff will take care of itself. Every job is your big break. For me, I think a pivotal moment in my work career, after I spent some time at University of the Arts, I became an apprentice and intern at the Walnut Street Theater that was just at the beginning of its now 35-year history. The relationships that I built in that year and a half that I was an apprentice have grown into really trusted friendships that have lasted me for 35 years. I still have a great relationship with that theater and will hopefully be working there next season. For me, that was like a pivotal moment in time because that was the first time I ever worked for a professional theater and got to take some studio class for free and learned how it really works and understood that it's a lot of hard work, but it's really rewarding when you have the passion and you're committed to it. After my time in Philadelphia, I worked around a couple of theaters, nothing major, nothing equity, but I got cast in a production of Sheer Madness, a comedy that's been running around for the last 40 years down in Washington at the Kennedy Center. And I proceeded to wind up working in that show for almost the next 4 years. And while I was working in DC with a full-time acting job, I used that as a bridge to move to New York and get settled in New York. And that led me to getting a laundry list of bread and butter jobs to just kind of, survive and pay the rent and take class and audition and make new networks and acquaintances and friends and eventually get an agent. And everything was always building toward the next step. And you have to learn to enjoy it along the way. Otherwise, if it's drudgery, you won't enjoy it. You won't have a good time. You won't be free and open to do good work because you'll be constantly worrying about everything.
So now chronologically, we're in New York now, and, looking at your resume, there's definitely also a smattering of film and television experiences. So maybe we can get into a little bit about what those were like and maybe some of the differences in working on stage versus behind a camera or in front of the camera, sure, I should say, as well as, maybe the differences in preparation and the way the job works out itself.
Well, the preparation is the same. You do the homework. You learn, if you're auditioning for a TV series, watch the show. Figure out if you fit in that universe. Know who the characters are. Know what the storylines are. Be prepared so that when you read an aside is just a short little scene of dialogue from the script, because they don't give you the whole script. They just give you a little bit to read in audition. But you have to make choices as an actor. You need to know the background. You need to know the relationships. So again, preparation is everything. I always liken the difference in the mediums that theater is like sculpture. You are unveiling, you are carving away material to reveal a performance. Working in television is working in watercolor. It's light, it's ephemeral, it's very fluid and very fast. And working in film is like an oil painting. You're working in layers, and that you're building layer upon layer to create something three-dimensional. It requires the same skills, but just applied a different way. When you're performing in a theater, you're filling a space that's anywhere between 25 seats and 1,000, if not more seats. When you're working on camera, your audience is a 2-inch lens. So learning camera technique and the idea of sight lines and where you're speaking and hitting your marks and knowing that you're in the right light, because the camera is going to be positioned for you to be in focus at an exact spot, that takes practice and requirement. And, nothing wrong with a class, learning those skills and always, working and recording yourself and record scenes that you do and learn what it is to communicate with just your eyes and the intention behind your eyes. The camera reveals what we're thinking just by seeing us. The stage, we have to convey that with our whole body. They couldn't be more different if you tried.
Yeah, it's very more intimate when you're working on camera. It's right there.
It's perfect, yeah.
And I know my limited experience in a scene that I got to film, I had the director right behind me constantly giving me direction, and that was more intense than my first time ever on stage, even in high school. It was wild.
Yeah, it's just a different experience. And, get all the experience you can. Be an extra. If your friends are filming something, volunteer to be on their crew. Creating our own content, creating our own work is so important developmentally, so that we actually learn what the medium we're performing is. Do a reading of a play with your friends at somebody's house. Invite other people over to listen to it. There you go. There's some performance experience. If you're sitting around waiting, you're never going to get anywhere.
That's very true. That's very true. So one of the things on your resume, which I think will pique a lot of people's interest, is the long-running and long-standing Law and Order, which you've done a few episodes. What was that like, being part of kind of an iconic television giant?
Bum 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 bum. It was. It was really exciting. And I thought that was, now there's another big break. The first time I did, an episode of Law and Order, and it's a funny story. I was in the 200th episode that they'd filmed. Julia Roberts was the guest star, and at the time she was dating Benjamin Bratt, who was one of the police officers, a co-star on the show. So there was a lot of attention to it filming. I had done a play with Sam Waterston a long time earlier off Broadway at a theater company, and I was always joking whenever I would see him that he says, "When are we going to see you on set?" And I said, "I'm trying to audition. It's not like I'm not trying." And I used to joke that I'm the only Jew in New York who hasn't been on Law and Order. And when I finally got cast, he apparently saw my name on the call sheet and came out of his trailer and greeted me when I was on set. And that was such a big deal for the production team, because apparently he doesn't do that at all. He stood very much apart from the company, from the cast, that when he came out to greet me, other people thought I must have been somebody really important. And all of a sudden I'm being introduced to Jerry Orbach and Benjamin Bratt, and there's Julia Roberts.
Wow.
And once they learned I was just the day player, most everyone was very nice, but suddenly you could just feel that, we thought you were someone really important.
But for that one moment.
It was all about me. They couldn't have been more gracious and kind. It was my first real experience on an episodic television series, and I learned right away that the regular, recurring cast, it's their home, and you're being invited to a party in their home. You have to behave. You have to know your lines. You have to be prepared. You have to not be thinking that you have all the time in the world and suddenly, I need to rehearse a few takes and warm up. You need to be on your mark. You need to be ready to go so that they can move on, because it is very much not about you. And that's where that preparation comes in. You have to do all that work on your own and make choices. And if you're in the ballpark, they'll film you and, they'll yell, "Check the gate." And that means they're making sure the lens is clean and the shot was good, and they move on. It's not like school. It's not like any experience where you're in rehearsal. It's professional. They expect you to know how to do your job and be able to move on.
That's very true. And when you say check the gate, brought me way back because, film isn't as used as a medium, especially on the, I guess, the lower levels of production anymore because videos become so good. But when you hear check the gate, it brings me back.
You don't even hear it anymore in film. Filmmaking is all digital. It's all digital now.
I know.
You almost never hear that, but that's a throwback to a time when they were on film. They had to make sure that the lens was clear and that the film had cleared it so that they could close up the reel so nothing got overdeveloped, and it was a whole different kind of medium.
Yes, and it was a wonderful medium, and ironically, I think some even video production in the post-production, they put elements back in to make it more look like film, even though it's not on film, which I always find a little ironic.
Yeah, I love it when you see the little scratches.
Yeah. But it's funny when you see true high-def video, you're like, ooh, that doesn't look good.
Oh, yeah. Suddenly movie stars who were always beautiful on film, suddenly you're going, oh, I didn't realize that you had an acne problem.
Right.
You're seeing them in all their glory. But, it just means that all the other art forms have to step up. And that's why the craft artisans that work in our industry are phenomenal. The lighting technicians, the makeup artists, props, wardrobe, everything to make the actor look their best. That goes so unrecognized. And I'll give anyone listening best piece of advice I can. Be respectful, be kind, and be gracious, especially to those craft artists who are working to make you look good, because that's their art form.
Yes.
And it can be real easy to get caught up in the headiness of, oh my God, I've got a role and I'm on camera and I'm important. No, everybody's equally important. That's a big thing to remember.
Well, definitely, because as an audience member, you're getting pulled into this world, and if one element is off, it can ruin the experience. And whether that's the performance, the lighting, the sound, the set, it all's got to work hand in hand, and that's a very important thing. And I think actors sometimes, I don't want to ever say forget, because that's not fair to them, but because the rehearsal process is so much about the performance, that the other elements, you just kind of take for granted that they're going to be there by tech and work great and be ready to go. But the work that goes into that.
That's the model of live theater. You rehearse to get to tech, so that then it becomes about the tech, and then it becomes about it all kind of coming together. But the preparation to reach that goal in television and film is probably the biggest difference, because it all happens instantly.
Correct. And sets are being built months ahead of time, sometimes years, depending on the production.
Yeah. I mean, they'll redo the lighting to turn around the camera to get this second angle of a two shot of a two-person scene. They're shooting, the perspective over one shoulder versus the other person's shoulder. And then, those lights are moving as fast as possible, because every minute is another dollar.
Yeah, we always call it hurry up and wait.
Yes, there's a lot of that. There is.
Because that's exactly it. We hurry up, do our job, wait while you're doing your job, and then switch it around.
Right. But the experience on Law & Order was really great, and it was a big deal. It was my first episodic, and I was really excited. And like every actor, I said, okay, this is it. And now it's going to get easy. And it doesn't change. You're still auditioning and pursuing your craft in another job and trying to keep a survival job so you can pay the rent at the same time. And it doesn't get easier with each successive level. It becomes a different challenge. But that's why you have to love what you do.
And that concludes part 1. Join us for part 2, where Ben discusses his break into Broadway, what's life like on tour, his giving back to the community, as well as what life is like for a working artist during this pandemic. This has been an Eagle Theater podcast. Thanks for listening, and I can't wait until we can see you at the theater. Welcome to the Eagle Theater Podcasts. I'm Chris Miller, Artistic Director of the Eagle Theater. Today is part 2 of my conversation with Ben Lipitz. In this episode, we talk about his break into Broadway, what life is like on tour, his charitable causes, and what life is like as an artist during this pandemic. Okay, let's switch gears and let's jump from film and television to the Great White Way. Let's talk a little Broadway and your experience in that world.
I've been really fortunate. I've been auditioning for Broadway shows as long as I've been in New York, television and film. And, it's not like you decide, okay, I'm only going to audition for one thing. You're auditioning for all of it at the same time. And depending on what you get cast in, depends on where you work. Making it to Broadway was another big step, another big break. But again, every job is a big break. I was on hiatus from working on Sopranos, doing a play in Sarasota, Florida, when I got a call from my agent to audition for The Producers. I had been auditioning for the Broadway musical The Producers for quite some time. I had a previous relationship with Mel Brooks, which is a story for another time. And, I had been auditioning unsuccessfully in terms of booking the job, but successfully enough that I kept getting called back and asked to keep auditioning. And on a Friday afternoon, in the middle of this run of the play Dirty Blonde at a theater in Florida, my agent said, you need to come up. You're going to audition for Mel Brooks and Susan Stroman. You need to prepare all this material, and we need you in New York City like by 11 a.m. So I flew up on a Friday morning, even though it was a show day in Florida. I booked my return for about 3 o'clock that afternoon. I'd make it back in time for the show that night, barring, any kind of bizarre scheduling tragedy or a delay. And of course, I wasn't even thinking that could be a problem. And I came in prepared for the audition. I did my work. It was great. Smiles all around. And as I was leaving, I checked in with my agent and said, run over to Ripley Greer, which is a rehearsal studio on 8th Avenue. They're seeing people for Lion King. And I didn't want to do it. I'd auditioned several times for Lion King. And while I always did well, I just never got cast. And I knew I had to catch a plane. So I kind of said, well, can I do it another time? I said, no. They really want to see you. Just run over there. They know you're running for a plane. They'll get you in and out real fast. So I ran over to the audition, and I'm told that the worldwide associate director was there. One of the casting directors from J. Binder Casting was there. And I went in and sang from my book. They really liked it. They said, would you take a look at these scenes? I was auditioning for Pumbaa. And I went back out in the hall, and I looked at the scenes, and I came back in and read the scenes, and they said, could you look at the song Hakuna Matata? And I said, I know it. Let's just sing it. So I sang that. They asked me to read the scenes again. They asked me to go back out in the hall while the other people would come in. Can you look at the song again? Can you read something else, sing something else from your book? And every time I'm in the room, all I did was glance down at my watch because I was flipping out that this in and out audition was now taking upwards of 30 minutes. And I had to get to the airport because I had a show. And the last time I went in, I think I was reading one of the scenes. It's the scene Under the Stars where Timon, Pumbaa, and Simba are looking up at the stars, and it's one of the the great Pumbaa lines. Ever wonder what those bright sparkly dots up there are? They're balls of gas burning billions of miles away, and it's a great laugh, and it's Pumbaa being genuine, but Timon thinking he's an idiot. And it's a really beautiful scene. And I was so impatient. I'm looking at my watch, and the director stops the audition and says, you know what? It's clear you don't want to be here. You have not stopped looking at your watch. I'm just, you know what? Thank you very much. And that's when it occurred to me how well the audition had been going, because they kept seeing me, kept asking me to do more. And I immediately backpedaled and was like, no, you misunderstand. I have to catch a plane in about 90 minutes. And I flew up from Florida just for you. Just to audition for you. And of course that changed the tone right away. The casting director confirmed that, he's in a show in Florida and he's got to catch a plane. Suddenly my impatience was understood. and they asked me what my out was on the show in Florida, and I told them, I said, "This is a 2-week notice," and they literally said, "Go catch your plane. When you get to the theater tonight, give your notice. You'll have an offer at the end of the day."
Wow.
And I booked the job in the room, and I walked out shaking because I couldn't believe that I almost blew it. But because I was concentrating on something else, I was free to do my best work.
Interesting.
And that's something that I'll always remember. That was the first Broadway show I booked, Lion King. And I've been fortunate. I never expected to be doing it as long as I have. I just started my 18th year with the show, between the Broadway production and the national tour. And they've been incredible with me over the years, that when I book other work, they give me a leave of absence to take the other work, whether it's short term for a couple of days to film something, or if it's even longer commitment of a couple of months to do another play. I've really created a great relationship with them that's really respectful and based in my always doing my best work and them trying to support me doing my best work. And I'm grateful for that. That was my Broadway debut, Lion King, and it still remains one of my favorite things I've ever done. I literally go to work every single day grateful for what I do.
That is awesome. So now currently, well, I say currently previous to this current situation, which I would definitely like to talk about a little bit later, you were on tour. What is that like as an actor living on the road, especially being away, say, from your family? Like, what things do you do to stay, just connected while you're away and working on the road?
Sure. Touring is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. I recommend everyone should tour. At some point in their lives, you'll learn so much about yourself, your process, and your own growth as a person. For me, the success of touring is establishing a routine everywhere I go. The exciting part is every 3 or 4 weeks, which is still 20 years into Lion King, we're still playing 3 and 4 week engagements, which is really unheard of. But every couple of weeks or every week, you'll have a new opening night. You'll have a new energy. You'll have a new chance to start anew and fresh and feel revitalized, which is really great versus a long run where you're in one theater and just going to work every day. And then you kind of shape your life around the sameness of that. Touring always gives you a new challenge and the excitement of a new venue. And along with the new venue comes an entirely new footprint of how everything backstage works, a new crew, new audience. New city means new climate, new housing. You have to find, for me, I always find the one supermarket that I really like, finding a gym. We're very lucky that our company helps provide us with a lot of that information, but everyone has their own taste and needs. So you explore as you're building your day around having the best energy at 7 o'clock at night and making sure that you can get to the theater without hitting traffic or without, finding it, knowing where you're going to park, and so that you're prepared to do your best work starting around 7 o'clock to 11 o'clock every night. And then the rest of the day is to rest and recover and be ready for the next day at 7 o'clock. And every time we change cities, that entire footprint of building to that best energy of 7 o'clock changes, because you have to create it anew.
Now,
that's why routine works for me.
Gotcha. When you go into a new theater in a new city, do you get much rehearsal time to figure all those logistics out, or are you just kind of thrown to the wolves like a lot of people on Broadway who are doing fill-ins don't get much rehearsal time with cast intact? They just kind of show up on stage first night, right?
It feels that way. It's close to that. In a new city, we get one rehearsal performance with the new crew on the new set in the new theater. We'll start on either a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, depending on how far we're traveling. And then that first performance is just a technical rehearsal. It's not a lot of costume, or it's costume without makeup, but it's full set, full lighting, full orchestra, full running crew, so they can learn their cues backstage. Mm-hmm. And we can learn the traffic backstage, because now everything is changing from theater to theater. Sometimes set pieces are on the floor, sometimes they're flown in the air, and you have to know where to stand and create your own path, your own track to get to on stage. I always say for Lion King, it's more choreographed backstage than it is on stage. And we get one rehearsal to figure all that out before we get a live audience.
Wow.
When you have a swing or someone filling in as a short-term replacement in a Broadway show, they'll rehearse. If they've been in the show before, they just have to have a couple of brush-up rehearsals. If they're brand new, they'll have 2 or 3 weeks of rehearsal before they get what's called a put-in rehearsal, which is that one technical rehearsal. They may be in full costume and makeup. Everyone else is just in sweats and kind of marking through the show, but it gives that performer at least one full rehearsal with the full company. After that, they're in the show.
Wow. But that also goes to show to what we talked about earlier about the preparation, knowing what you need to know, so when you show up, you're ready to go.
Oh, yeah, and the preparation and professionalism of maintaining 8 shows a week, unless you've done it long term, I don't think anyone has any idea that it really is about maintaining your stamina, going to the gym, eating right, sleeping, making sure you stay hydrated, making sure you're staying healthy, because 8 shows a week wears you out very quickly. And that's why your entire day becomes about having enough energy and enough preparation to maintain that performance level, because it's not like you get to say, oh, well, I only have to get through a weekend and then I'm done and I can rest. There's always another show on Tuesday.
Right. Wow. And physically, that's pretty demanding as well.
It is. And that's why you really have to stay in the best shape possible and take care of yourself. That's a little harder on tour versus being in a resident company, like being in a Broadway theater or being in a regional theater. You traveling somewhere to work in a regional theater that isn't your home, but you don't have to travel every week or every 2 weeks. You're still sitting down. But it's all about taking care of yourself the best possible way, because your responsibility is to your audience to be at your best that evening.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit about the Jccc Broadway Live series, which I know is a charitable event that you do every year that's very special to you. So tell us a little bit about that, how that came about, and some of your experiences through that. And maybe we could even then touch on last year's full staging of Fiddler on the Roof, and we can almost talk about that separately, about how that project was for you.
Sure. I have always believed in giving back to the community that I'm working in. In the Broadway community, I'm a very big supporter and activist for Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS. I shepherd the fundraising effort that our show makes twice a year, and am honored and proud to be responsible for raising $250,000 every year just from our fundraising effort, as well as producing some cabaret benefits with my cast to benefit local service organizations that we partner with through Broadway Cares throughout the year. The Jccc Broadway Live program came about, having roots and history in the community in Cherry Hill. One of my very best friends approached me to produce a fundraiser. Said, I see you doing all these benefits. Would you do one for the Jccc camps, of which I was a camper when I was a kid and worked as a counselor in my 20s, and it's been a part of my life as long as I can remember, the Jccc camps, and that entire community has been a part of my life as long as I can remember. And even though I no longer live in Cherry Hill, it's still very dear and important to me. So I said, sure, let's do a Broadway concert. I invited half a dozen other Broadway performers, and we had a piano, and we just sang our faces off. And I think that first year we maybe raised $4,000 or $5,000, and it went toward scholarship programs for special needs kids to go to summer camp. And that was in 2009. Here we were, it's now 11 years, but here we were, the program grew every year. Every year we increased one year it was one piano, the next year it was 2 pianos, then it was suddenly 2 pianos, a bass, and a drum. And after a couple of years, we had a combo with piano, bass, drums. We had a guitar, we added a horn section, we had brass, we added strings. And every year it just kind of kept growing. And it, became 9 and 10 performers all singing Broadway classics with an orchestra at the JCC. We sell out every year, 750 people. It's become incredibly dear to the community and supported. And now, somewhere along the way, we picked up a foundational sponsor that does a 7-to-1 match. The Saltzman Foundation very generously does a 7-to-1 match. So if we raise $50,000, suddenly that turns into another $350,000. So we're raising $400,000 for this scholarship program and for the camp the camp special needs programs and the JCC's scholarship. Every year the show gets a little better. It's always a great show. Everyone's always excited. In the past, we've had some really great Broadway stars. Performing with us twice was Tony Award winner Debbie Gravitt. We've had Rob McClure, Tony nominee, who's currently getting ready to star in Mrs. Doubtfire. The original Aladdin, Adam Jacobs, Rob Evan from Jekyll and Hyde. I mean, we've had literally a who's who out of some really great Broadway luminaries. And for the 10th anniversary last spring, the year earlier, when we were doing the 9th year show, for the 10th anniversary, I decided I wanted to do something really kind of special and landmark. And what was originally going to be a staged reading, kind of with, librettos in hand with maybe a small orchestra and just understanding it, on stage with music stands. Suddenly we were going to do a full staged reading of Fiddler on the Roof with music. And every step along the way, the community, not just the Jewish community in southern New Jersey, in Cherry Hill, but even the township and the school board, every time they heard what we were proposing to do, everyone said, well, how can I help? What can we do? So suddenly we moved out of the JCC into the Cherry Hill West Auditorium. So now we increased our inventory by 350. We had 1,000 seats to sell, and we had a stage. So we needed lighting, and Tina Hines, Costumes by Tina, who's been a friend of mine ever since high school, came on board to costume, and that's when I was introduced to you as our tech director, and suddenly a community was formed around this passionate idea, and we decided to include the high school students from both East and West, as well as some of the special needs kids who benefit from this program, to come on stage with 22 Broadway professionals who spent 5 days in a studio in New York. We started rehearsals on a Tuesday. We spent 5 days in a studio in New York, and we staged and choreographed the entire show. We moved down to Cherry Hill on Friday night, for a sitz probe with the orchestra, which was a 13-piece all-union professional orchestra. Don't even ask me how I got that to happen. Again, every time we spoke to someone, they were so excited by the idea of this for a one-night benefit. Everyone just came on board, offering, what can I do? What more can I give to make this happen? So we moved into the theater on Friday, Saturday. We rehearsed all day Saturday, all day Sunday. We rehearsed a little bit Monday. Set and lights are being built around us as we're happening. Mm-hmm. We borrowed a lot of props and scenic pieces from Cherry Hill East, which had just done Fiddler a few months earlier. So we were fortunate that we had a lot to pick from. But with your help, Chris, we also designed something entirely new that looked like it was just a retread of someone else's production. And for one night, we did an entire production of Fiddler on the Roof with, as I mentioned, Debbie Gravitt. Tony Award winner Debbie Gravitt was Golda. Broadway legend Lonnie Ackerman. She had replaced Betty Buckley in Cats. She had replaced her name just went out of my head. In Evita. Patti LuPone. She replaced Patti LuPone in Evita. And Lonnie is a Broadway legend in her own right. She was our Yenta. We had cast members from the most recent production of Fiddler come back and reprise their roles. And it was a really remarkable night. If we had to do it twice, the wheels would have probably come off the bus. But for one night, with 1,000 people in attendance, we put on a full production, all benefiting this scholarship program. And it was a culmination of not just everyone's effort, but the 10 years previously that we'd been building this program. and Broadway Cares was a corporate sponsor. Disney Theatrical was a corporate sponsor. Many philanthropists in the Cherry Hill community stepped forward and donated, and it really became an entire community's effort to celebrate the theater in one night with one of the most beloved musicals of all time.
It was definitely an amazing experience for me, not only obviously to meet and get to work with you, but being around professionals at the top of their game. It was really fascinating to kind of have a little piece of that experience. But also, what it did to me was made me realize that theater is theater, and doesn't matter what level it is on. There's a lot of similarity and comfort, whether it's a high school production, a community, a regional, Broadway, and obviously the talent gets up there and the money gets up there. But the core of what it is the same. And that was really kind of eye-opening, but also almost like peaceful, like settling, like, okay, this is something pretty awesome, and we all get to share it, whether you're a high schooler or a youngster in a community program, all the way up.
I'm hoping that for the students that joined our company, that was because they also got to watch the rehearsal, sitting around waiting a lot. Again, hurry up and wait. But when it came their time to step on stage, having witnessed the contribution and effort that all the professionals were making, and that they were on stage with us as equals, I'm hoping that for them, the takeaway is exactly what you talked about, that, wow, this is exactly how it is when we do our spring musical. And this is a professional Broadway company, and it's exactly the same. And I'm hoping that connection is one of the most valuable things that they take away from it as they go forward, that they recognize, I've already been a part of this. I know what to expect. I know how to work.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I know, talking with several of them after the fact, that they just adored the experience and thought how cool it was. All right, so what's next for you? What's on the horizon? What projects are simmering that you're allowed to talk about?
Yeah, I can't talk about any. No, that's not true. Uh, uh, right now, again, it's a lot of hurry up and wait. Broadway is dark,
Right.
which is a historic event in and of itself. Yes, just yesterday they extended the suspension until the beginning of June, if not the beginning of July. And we're kind of all in a wait and see attitude to see what happens and when it happens. And it's beyond our control. And I want to talk about that as we talk about how things are changing because of the COVID-19.
Yes, please.
But what's next for me is a return to Lion King when that starts up. And then next season, I will be playing Willie Loman in Death of a Salesman at the Walnut Street Theater.
Well, that's great, getting to come back to some of your roots.
Yes. It was one of the first plays I did in high school. It's been a favorite of mine all my life, and I'm excited beyond any way to express, and intimidated and terrified at the idea of doing this classic play. But I cannot wait to dig in. I've been doing a lot of pre-production homework and learning the play and reading it and just spending time with it, so that when it comes time to actually get on our feet, that it'll resonate a little deeper and a little richer in me. But it's been a part of me as an actor ever since I was 14 years old. That's what's next. I am very grateful to have some phenomenal representation that is still finding opportunities for me, even with what's going on right now. Everything is, filming your own auditions at home and submitting tape. So I'm happy to have a little bit of that busy, and who knows when it'll shoot or if it'll shoot or if I book, but the opportunity is what presents itself. You have to get ready and prepare to do your own work, and self-taping is an art form all in itself, but you make the most of the opportunities that you're given. So that's what's going on. As far as the pandemic and how it's changing,
Mm-hmm.
especially the face of Broadway, I've been kind of torn about, a lot of the Zoom performances that are happening, while I'm inspired by them and I'm grateful to see friends and other people stepping up and doing so much, especially in terms of fundraising, when something's done for charitable reasons, I'm always touched by it. But I'm also feeling a little leery about it, because our art form is about live interaction. And when we take it online, we're becoming filmmakers and not live theater artists. And I'm not knocking it, but I'm acknowledging that it's somehow different and changing. And right now, it's tough to kind of admit that we're not essential workers. Art is essential, and the inspiration that we can tap into and create and make, that's essential. But putting ourselves out there and thinking that our contribution is essential might be where I start to think that it's a little different, because right now essential is healthcare workers and first responders and people driving trucks and making sure that our groceries are full, and who are, risking their very health to make sure that we have what we need. And it's okay to acknowledge that and step back and use this time to reflect and renew our commitment to our art form. Absolutely look for opportunities to teach and learn and inspire, but recognize that the art form of live theater isn't essential, because it can endanger everyone right now. And it's okay to recognize that we have to pause. And in pausing, that's where I think we get that renewal and reflection.
And I think that's a great way to look at it. And I also think to make a counterpoint, as these essential workers are doing, God's work, essentially working and putting themselves into danger just so we can be healthy ourselves, or have toilet paper or ketchup. That is amazing. But I also feel that there is a little bit of the thread of society, that arts and culture, that is then what those people get to turn to forget about the intenseness of what they're doing. They don't have that opportunity right now. And my fear is, from almost a mental health standpoint, as a society, when we come out of this, where are we going to be at? And also the scariest question is, what's it going to look like when we come out of this? I know at our level, as a regional professional theater, we're trying to figure out, how do we program in the light of a society where maybe half the people can do things and the other half still have to stay quarantined until we have a vaccine? And how do we provide programming for both sets of people now? It's a very scary landscape, trying to look forward and understanding it. I'm sure Broadway down to community and even high schools are dealing with the same issue.
Right. And I mean, you're getting into the weeds of it. How can you responsibly rehearse a company in one room for 6 or 7 hours a day, not knowing if someone might be getting someone else sick, or, suddenly you're asymptomatic, but then you're going home and getting someone else sick? I mean, there are too many questions to resolve now, which is why I think it's okay that we're on a pause. Mm-hmm. But I also think that right now everyone's turning to the arts incredibly through television and film and music and recorded performance, and it's not. I think it's essential in that regard that everyone does have that outlet, which is why the arts getting cut, any funding to the arts being cut, is such an anathema to me, because everyone's turning to the arts for that comfort, for that release. For that healing power that it creates, for the distraction, for the escape, for the stories that we tell and how we tell them is what's changing. I think when life returns to normal, and I put normal in quotes, because I don't think it'll ever be normal the way we remember it. I think there'll be a new normal. And I've been really fond of using this description lately. When something you treasure and value is shattered, much like our lives have been, I think as artists, it becomes dependent upon us to pick up those pieces and learn to create a mosaic. And by definition, a mosaic is broken pieces reassembled to create something new and beautiful. It's not the same, but it's just as valuable, and it still has its beauty. And I think that if we can approach it in that regard, and that idea that we're going to have opportunity to create something new and just as valuable, as opposed to trying to get back to what we had, I think we'll all be much, much better for it by acknowledging it and moving through it that way. And I don't know what to expect. I hope that when live performance is safe, I think the demand for it is going to be through the roof, because that alchemy that happens between an audience and performers, between stage and the audience, is unlike anything we experience. That's why we gather together to listen to stories. And even if we know them or we don't know them, it's that coming together that really elevates the art form, and the shared experience that's different every single night is what makes it so vital.
Well, that is a beautiful metaphor, and definitely a call for hope in these dark times, especially for the gig economy artists and everyone out there really who's being affected by this, which is really everybody, right? This isn't this isn't just New York or, the populated areas. It's not just certain type of workers losing work. I mean, it's everybody, and we just need to, really come together without being able to come together. It's such a weird, juxtaposition.
And I think opportunities like this, the podcast and Zoom classes, these are essential tools to keep our instrument and our craft alive and explore and learn and have that opportunity, so that when we do come back, we have all of that available to us. And then if you're creating online content, acknowledge that it's not theater, it's filmmaking, and that's great too. And I'm not knocking, just saying, know that you're channeling it into something else, which I think is also important too. But it's still it's not going to have the same impact that being in a room with the artists and the audience is going to have.
That energy.
It doesn't translate remotely.
Wow. Well, listen, I really want to thank you for giving me an hour of your time during this to talk and to put your story out there, and hopefully everybody listening will learn something, if not have been at least entertained. Is there anything you want to leave us with? Anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to, or maybe a piece of advice, or maybe because it's Passover, a nice little whatever?
I don't know. I feel like if you brush your door with sanitizer, you're getting Passover this year. I don't know. The best piece of advice I can give anyone aspiring or working as an artist is be your truest self. Don't worry about figuring out what someone else is expecting you to be. Be the best version of yourself and let that shine. We're all unique and individual, and that's what's going to ultimately be our greatest gift to our own talent.
Wow, that's great. That's great. All right, well, that's it. Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Chris.
And that concludes part 2. Join us for more talks with local artists as we try to give you, the listener, an insider's view into what working in professional theater is all about. Join me next week when I talk with Jeff Kuhn, Barrymore award-winning actor. This has been an Eagle Theater podcast. Thanks for listening, and I can't wait until we can see you at the theater.